The journey of an entrepreneur is not for the faint of heart. They often experience failure.
When I finally said it's time to walk away, and tears just came pouring down my face. Because in my mind at that moment, I was living the quote, American dream, what I thought. I also thought I had failed.
I remember laying on my bathroom floor in tears thinking, oh my God, everything I've built, I've just lost overnight. What am I going to do?
But many of them will find themselves in the process.
Talk about that mid-game moment. It was a full reset, a reboot, a sabbatical, time to work on myself, time to challenge who I was, draw on and reflect on all of the past experiences I'd had. And, also, look outwards into other sources of wisdom. It was actually the time that I joined the Outlier Project, then Talent Champions Council.
And in doing so, they'll reach new heights of success that they only dreamed was possible.
I was like, this thing's got a heartbeat. I don't know how, but it does. And so I went for it.
We outperformed. We felt like we earned it, but it was such a massive increase from the initial LOI.
Welcome to the Midgame Mindset. Join us as we dive into the pivotal moments that shape today's top sales and marketing leaders, RevOps innovators, and entrepreneurs. This is where grit meets growth and the game changes for good. If you find value in this conversation, be sure to share it with another growth leader who would enjoy it. And now, let's get to the show. Welcome to the Midgame Mindset. I'm your host, Rich Bishop, and I've been interviewing growth leaders now for about 8 months or so since we've started this podcast. And they come in all shapes and sizes. Marketing leaders, sales leaders, entrepreneurs, and others that are all concerned with the growth of their companies, and in the process, also with their own personal and professional growth. And without a doubt, there are some key themes that have started to pop up as I've interviewed a number of these, and one of them happens to be with entrepreneurs. Many entrepreneurs say that it's a very lonely road to go down, but when you talk to many of them, you start to hear some similar themes. There's great excitement and opportunity at the beginning, but without a doubt, they face failure in the process. Many of them will step back and take another look at themselves and reprioritize and redefine what success means. And after that, they then are able to reach new heights of success as they come back at it from a different perspective and a different mindset. And that's exactly why we've set out to do this podcast, is to really get into a growth leader's mind and understand how they approach those challenges. What we want to do today is bring to you 4 of our entrepreneur guests from the past so that we can hear about their journeys and their stories, that you can learn what that successful mindset looks like. We're going to hear today from 4 incredible entrepreneurs that we've interviewed in prior episodes. And we're going to take some of the best pieces of those interviews and include them here for you today. And we're going to start with Courtney Turich. Courtney is the co-founder of a company called Monkey Mat, and she took Monkey Mat onto the Shark Tank stage and was grilled in front of millions of people, just like you see on all of the shows. And she ended up striking a deal with Mark Cuban and Lori Greiner. It was an incredible experience for her. But as they got further into trying to build the company, she and her husband realized maybe it's not right for us to do this long term. We're also going to hear from Krista Anderson, who survived cancer and in the process was absolutely appalled with the food choices that were available in the hospital while she was getting her treatment. She's made it her mission to bring healthy food and snacks to places where maybe people can't find them, like gas stations, like airport convenience stores, and unfortunately, sometimes hospitals too. We're also going to hear from Brian McNally. Brian is a gritty guy from the streets of Philly who started his company Melio as a healthcare placement company, and he bootstrapped it from 0 to $50 million. And of course, had some bumps and bruises to face along the way. And then last but not least, we're also going to hear from Morgan Gebhardt, who is a serial entrepreneur and CRO, who's taken companies from literally the ground stage to 300 million in revenue. He had to hit pause and really step back and decide what it was that he wanted to do with his life in order to make an impact after he saw some of that success and realized maybe this isn't really who I am. Can't wait to dive into these important lessons from entrepreneurs. Let's face it, nobody wants to fail. Failing is hard. It bruises the ego. And some people can actually take that as a reason to just stop doing what they're doing altogether. Successful entrepreneurs will take failure as a way to learn, as a way to grow, and more importantly, as a way to pivot their life in the direction that they're taking into something more productive. That's exactly what we heard from Courtney Turich when we were talking to her about her company, Monkey Mat, and the experience that she had with Lori Grenier and Mark Cuban as her mentors. Take a listen. Once it airs, right? Because they want to protect their asset, which is the show, and making sure that the surprise is there for everybody and it's not ruined. So then you've got Lori and Mark that you're now working with. Take us through the rest of then what happened with the company and with you.
Yeah. So Mark and Lori were very involved. I will share with you, Mark Cuban always has the entrepreneur's best interests. I don't know how this guy does it, but you would send him an email and I'm telling you, he would respond within minutes. It might not be a lengthy response, but it would be very direct and to the point. He had a full team to help us with website design, just financial accounting and all of that. We had a business manager. They would set up different places where we could go do big promotions at. We even went on Shop HQ, so one of those shopping channels. So I got to present on a shopping channel, which was really cool. And not going to lie, for a moment, I thought that was my next calling, Rich. I thought I was going to be...
I can see that.
Yep,
I can see that. It may still be.
Yeah, I did. And then Lori Grenier, awesome. She got us on QVC. I wasn't personally on QVC, but she did represent the product there. We had a great run. And reality was, at the end of the day, it just wasn't going to bring in what we needed financially to survive. Everything that came in went back out for inventory, and it was just this constant cycle. And then it came to, with me, my business partner, and myself, is this what we really want to be doing? Right? Like, are we really in this? And I was really struggling financially. And my husband looked at me and he said, we can't keep doing this. We got to move on. And that was a moment that I had to make a hard decision. Was I going to stay or was I going to go? And part of that was my marriage, right? Like, I really had to look reality in the face and say, is this something I can keep doing? And I couldn't.
That is something so hard for anybody to go through, because you've poured your heart and soul into building this company to get this to where it was. You've had some amazing success with it, right? And getting those deals. But then to be able to say, you know what, this isn't quite going to cut it for what we need and what we want out of our lives, and be able to shift. First of all, there's nothing at all wrong with doing that. But second of all, I think there are a lot of entrepreneurs that feel like there is, or maybe there's a sense of shame at the moment that happens. Did you go through some of that as well? And what was that like?
I sure did. I went through a lot of shame. And Rich, even thinking about it, I get a little emotional. Because I knew deep down inside the answer was that I needed to move on, but I was so afraid to say it out loud. I will never forget the moment I was talking to another Shark Tank entrepreneur who had to walk away from her business. I know where I was standing in my house, exactly in the doorway when I finally said it's time to walk away, and tears just came pouring down my face. Because in my mind at that moment, I was living the quote American dream, what I thought. I also thought I had failed.
Yep.
And, it's really wild to look back how far I've come from that moment and to realize it was still only the beginning for me.
Courtney decided to step away for a little while and find herself in what it was that she truly wanted. And we'll hear from her again in just a few moments about what that journey was like and where she is now. But sometimes you don't have the choice to make that decision. Sometimes you're forced into it, sometimes by some of your biggest partners. That's what we heard from Krista Anderson, where one of her distributors for her company ended up essentially stealing the idea and cutting her out. As you can imagine, this was really tough for her to deal with. But again, she learned some really important things about herself and her business in the process. That's awesome. So you went for it. You ended up pulling you found the manufacturers that you were looking for, right? Did you find them at that show, or did it take some time to kind of settle in on who's really providing the healthy food here that I can get behind and put my brand behind?
I did find some at the trade show, absolutely. And some were just connections I made by online searching. And from the beginning of my research to start the business, of this conversation with the convenience store guy to going into the first convenience store, was 6 months. So it was quite fast, surprisingly. I had a lot of hiccups along the way with the merchandising displays and things like that, but I pulled the portfolio together fairly quickly and we gave it a test. So
that's great. So you pulled the portfolio together, got into the stores. Now, did you have distribution at that point, or were you working all of that out of your garage studio?
Oh my Lord. I have photos I sometimes when I see, I'm like, how did I ever survive this moment of my life? But I had pallets of product and UPS deliveries delivered to my door. I would carry them up the steps, stock them in my bedroom, kitchen, living room. It was one room. And just had my inventory in this room. And then I would deliver all the deliveries to the stores twice a week, sometimes three times a week, in my Honda Accord. And I did this for, I think, 3 years until it got too big where I couldn't keep driving around, and it expanded out of Tennessee, and then we had to find a distributor to do it for us. So
so you're living in boxes, you're doing laundry around boxes. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Such a great story of the grit that it takes to really get something off the ground and moving. So once you've expanded so far that you can't do the distribution yourself, tell me about that first distribution agreement that you had.
Well, the retailer, they kind of forced it onto the distributor because the program was doing really well and we had enough volume for them to bring these items into their warehouse. And so we got it all set up. I did all the paperwork for that, and then they started delivering to all the stores. It was pretty seamless, but yeah, I mean, it allowed me to then take the business to anywhere in the United States with that new strategy that, okay, now I know healthy foods can sell in convenience stores. Then we started to move into universities. Now we're in a lot more other retail categories, but it started to grow. It gave me the opportunity to really expand nationwide. So, and we had a kind of a strategy that could be, was a good blueprint to duplicate into other parts of the country. So, and then of course, that's when that same distributor came in and pretty much stole everything. And unfortunately, you're a small business, you can't afford to hire a lawyer to sue them. For me, I've never taken an investor in this business, and I've bootstrapped everything. And so I didn't have the will to fight back. I couldn't do it. And I lost, everything at that point. So
God, that had to be so hard to deal with. What was that process like of kind of getting to, or going through the stages of grief, I'm sure that anyone would kind of expect in that situation? What was that like for you, and what was the moment where you came out on the other side and decided what your next step was going to be?
I will say I lost at that moment all trust in humanity in a way, because the people I was working with, they were friends too. I was working with a group of guys in this organization, and they were kind of like a brother. At times I could ask advice, and they were very supportive and knew the mission behind Healthy on the Go. This has never been a money business for me. It's been very obviously mission based. And how they could just rip off a small business. Like, I remember laying on my bathroom floor in tears thinking, oh my God, everything I've built, I've just lost overnight. What am I going to do?
To experience that kind of failure is one thing. And there are a lot of people that don't really look into what it means. They don't look internally to see what needs to change. And a lot of people will play the blame game. Blaming others, blaming, in Krista's case, the distributor for what had happened. But that's not what she did. We'll hear the same thing now from Brian McNally. It's not that the economy in 2020 collapsed or struggled and really caused a dent in his business. He used this as an opportunity to turn inward and look inside himself and identify what it was that he needed to do differently if he was going to be effective.
I had thought I was in a good mental place and was strong, but really I hadn't been tested, truly tested. So we're 5 years in, it's March, we are on a run rate to do 20 million. I mean, we got the whole company pushing for 20 and 20, we're juiced. The bottom falls out. We lose 50% of our business in 6 weeks. I'm hemorrhaging cash, like most people, struggling on what to do with my employees. And we were built on integrity and culture, right? So how do you honor that in the toughest moments that you have? I was letting everyone else dictate to me how my life was going to go and how my business was going to go. And I was blaming everyone else around me. And I read 2 books during that time. One, I deleted social media off of my phone, which was to get me out of the funk, right? Because it was just a negative spiral. But then I downloaded Audible and listened to David Goggins' Can't Hurt Me and Jocko Willing's Extreme Ownership. And both just had a profound, immediate impact on my life. And I think one of the things that I've been blessed to be able to do is take action on things that I learn. I don't just consume information and then go on and consume more. I actually implement. So when I read Goggins' Can't Hurt Me, I'm like, well, this guy's been through a lot worse situation than I have. And he pulled himself out of it. So basically, I was being a little bitch. I was whining and complaining about what the world did to me. And I'm like, that's not how I'm raised. I just talked about where I came from, right? And how I was just tough, gritty neighborhood I came from. And so I started to really take accountability for looking at life through the lens that I am in control of how I respond to anything that happens. And if people are failing around me or failing to meet my expectations, it's because I didn't set them properly or I didn't train them properly. So there's always something I can do to improve my situation.
There are a lot of entrepreneurs that are very type A personalities. They're go-getters. They want to get shit done. And this works for them in many ways. That's how they get started. And that's how they can be successful. But unfortunately, that can create an illusion of control. We heard just recently from Brian that sometimes there are things outside of our control. And it's important to understand and step back. When do we control the situation? And when do we not?
If you fast forward through 2 pivots of that business, again, from services to automation to conversational AI, to over 300 million in annual recurring revenue, great journey. But after a while, something was off. It wasn't right. And I had that realization that I had to take stock, step back, and recognize that there were dynamics that were beyond my control, right? Mm-hmm. We have an illusion of control, most human beings, right? We think that we can directly influence all of the events around us. But in the end, that only goes so far. And I had that realization that the business was kind of eroding from within first. And it was increasingly difficult for me to have an impact, drive effective change, continue that growth trajectory. But after 15 years, it's really tough to step away. And the decision I made wasn't to step away into another opportunity. Right? The decision I made was to step completely away from the working world, right? And talk about that mid-game moment. It was a full reset, a reboot, a sabbatical, time to work on myself, time to challenge who I was, draw on and reflect on all of the past experiences I'd had, and also look outwards into other sources of wisdom. It was actually the time that I joined the Outlier Project, then Talent Champions Council, and focusing on community and looking for that sense of purpose outside of the working world, which so many of us have at the center of our sort of selves.
Mm-hmm. For sure, that sense of community is important, and it's hard when you're in that grind of, especially the startup world, where it's so fast paced. Startup world, so venture capital, private equity backed companies, there's always an urgency to delivering results and to making change happen. That must have, 15 years is a long time to be grinding and going, and to go from 2 million to 300 is a massive change. You had to have, I'm sure, rewrite the organization multiple times in order to get there. How do you go from that grind and the gas pedal being down all the time to sabbatical? That had to have been a challenge.
Yeah, it was. It was, on one hand, very difficult. There was the constant sort of combination of pull to keep me in that action, and frankly also that a little bit of a sense of guilt, counterbalancing that pull, that gravity, that I wasn't taking effective care of myself, and if I couldn't take care of myself, I couldn't care for those around me, right? The transition itself was, after I made the decision and after I exited, I won't say that I didn't have recurring dreams of being back in the workplace on the regular for weeks, if not months, right? It's sort of, that becomes really part of your life. But I was able to recenter in other things. I was fortunate to have a piece of property that shortly after I took the sabbatical, moved the family to our house in the country, full-time out of the city. And that gave me literal and figurative grounding in a way. I started working in the forest doing timber stand improvement. I helped my wife start a flower farm. I just centered on being in nature more than anything else. And that made that transition so much easier.
Yeah, for sure. And how long did that sabbatical last?
So I took that sabbatical open-ended intentionally. I had some sort of rough imaginary timelines in my head, like, hey, maybe I'll take it for 3 months or 6 months. We'll see how it goes. 3 months after I exited the business, this little thing called COVID happened. And I, of course, blessing in disguise in a way, where, the decision we'd made to leave the city. And so I looked at that and I said, hey, right, maybe this is just another sign from the universe, if that's how you want to look at it, saying, no, you really need a break to disconnect. Whether you like it or not, you're going to be isolating out here. And so I would say that sabbatical lasted just short of 3 years. And I was lucky enough to have had enough success in the previous business to have the safety net,
sure,
to allow that to be open-ended. And, through that, doing a little bit of consulting or advisory work as it came up, completely on my own terms. And I would highly advise anybody that can take an extended break. I don't know if I would advise 3 years, but for me, it was right.
Yeah, the world was working in your favor in that sense, just in all of the change and upheaval that took place in 2020 and beyond from there, for sure. It's important to recognize what we don't have control over. But there are some things that we do have control over, and sometimes we have to discover that ourselves. Courtney Turich told us about how she stepped away from Monkey Mat and took a job as a sales rep again to get that passion and that fire back for being a salesperson, before she then had the opportunity to go on to her medical device company called Cooler Heads. She tells us a little bit more about that transition and how she found herself in the process.
There was a previous company before Cooler Heads where I'm at today. I went to go work for a mentor of mine, Ryan Denny, and I can't say enough about him, because it was when I stepped back into the med device space, I told myself that I wanted to go back into leadership. But what I didn't realize is I needed to take a step back and just go in and take care of myself. And that was being a rep. So I went back in, ended up having just this amazing ride with a startup called Verum Medical for lung cancer. And then when that was over, I stumbled upon Cooler Heads, and that's where I've been the past almost 4 years, which has been another crazy wild ride. I joined Cooler Heads before we commercialized. So I was part of the setting up that commercialization strategy. And I'll never forget running around trying to sell that first unit myself.
That's great. So
Yeah.
you get to, you help with commercialization. You then, of course, want to prove, hey, yes, there is a viable market for this. We can do this. After being a rep, to kind of, I guess, in many ways, get your feet under you again, right? Is that kind of what that was about, being a rep and just kind of getting back into the rhythm of things? And then that kind of opened up the door for Cooler Heads and what you were doing there?
Yeah, a great point, Rich. So it did. It allowed me to just get my feet under myself again and really to get my head straight, to get my mindset back aligned and what I really needed to do to embody who I was again at the core, because I'd lost myself there towards the end when I left my Shark Tank company. But when I was at that lost startup, I had opportunities where I grew into some leadership roles within the company. Mm-hmm. And that allowed, again, that fire inside to come to the surface to help grow some younger reps below me. And it was one of the most rewarding experiences I've had professionally to date, except for now Cooler Heads.
That you got a taste of that leadership again, almost, right? It was like, all right, yeah, that's what I want. You started, it sounds like you started to kind of feel alive again in that moment as a result.
Not kind of, I did. I really came alive and really started to understand who I was, Rich. I think that's an important part of all of this. You know, while I felt so lost when I left my Shark Tank company, stepping in and just taking care of me allowed me to really focus on who is Courtney. Mm-hmm. And that's where I rebuilt my confidence. I learned where my voice was again, and also just realized to go out and be myself was one of the most powerful things I could do.
Was there something about that role and that experience that did you find something new, or did you rediscover something that you knew was there, but maybe you had repressed it or set it aside because of what it was, because you were chasing that American dream?
I believe it was always there. I think it was lost, and I didn't really understand my strengths to their full capacity. Back to, I'm a huge believer in the Gallup Strength Finder. I knew what my strengths were, but it wasn't until I started to see some successes happening within my territory and that I started to reflect back and say, why am I doing so well? Why am I feeling like I'm really in this great groove? What am I doing differently now that I wasn't doing before? And I was embodying who I was at my core. Like I understood myself finally. And then I took that and I passed it on to my team and helped them do the same thing. Which, you know, to watch them have those aha moments when they saw their strengths surface and that they were thriving and we were all working, like we were on this, like we were just all in sync, so dialed in. It was one of the coolest experiences ever, Rich. And that's when I realized I had this gift of helping other people realize what makes them shine. And if I can do that for them, it makes me shine even more.
Courtney stepped back into the role of a sales rep and found her passion again for what it was that she was doing. That really solidified her next steps in Cooler Heads. Now, when we look at Krista Anderson, she didn't step back into another role. She stepped into an entirely new country.
I booked a one-way ticket and went to France, and I was like, I have got to save myself because I couldn't breathe. I was really stressed. And so I spent a couple months in France and just processing everything. And I decided I wanted to move. So I went home, applied for a visa, packed 3 suitcases, and I moved to the south of France. And I've been here ever since.
Wow.
So it's not the answer for everybody, but I will say it's shocking to me where the business is today after I decided to pick up the pieces and that journey that I went on to get there.
Yeah, I definitely want to unpack that because I think that's important. There are a lot of people who deal with, if they deal with the situation that you described, if they deal with that kind of situation in their lives, sometimes it's a divorce, sometimes it's a business failing, sometimes it's a loved one close to them passing away, right? Maybe it's just even failed relationships in general, that a lot of times people will try to either medicate it chemically, right? Or they'll try to just move past it and stay busy. And that's where a lot of, workaholic tendencies tend to come from, is let me just keep going and just keep busy so that I don't have to pause, sit back and reflect on what's just happened. And I think there's a lot of value in sitting in that moment, in that part that just really sucks, and understanding and learning, okay, what is it that I'm supposed to learn here? What is it that I'm supposed to see? And I applaud you. A change of scenery to France sounds like it helped to give you the right kind of perspective to be able to see it and sit in that for a little bit, but learn the lessons that you were probably intended to learn as a part of that process.
Absolutely. I could talk for days on what the lessons I've learned from leaving a society that we grow up in, and one way of thinking, one way of being, and one way of doing, to another culture, and you learn so much from other cultures. I think that's the power of travel. But for me, I rode the business out financially while I took a break, and as the unraveling was happening, I was slowly running out of money. And there was a moment where I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I think I have to get a job, because I couldn't decide if I wanted to go back to building this business again. I thought, why would I build something up that someone can just wipe out in an instant? And I didn't trust anybody anymore. But it came back to, after taking a year or so off, and running this through my head over and over and over. I tried to start another company. It just didn't flow, didn't feel right. But there was something sitting in me. And I think, it's this calling or what we're supposed to do with our life in a way. And I couldn't get rid of it. And so I thought, all right, I'm going to go back to this, but with very positive a vengeance, So I'm on fire, and we're going to fight harder than we fought before. And it took me a long time to revive and stand back up and do that again. But the thing that I will say is what I learned from the French culture is that it was not about me anymore. And what I was building the business on before, I was never interested, like I said, in money, or fame or any of that. But I felt like I was too much the front of the business with my story.
So we've covered in the entrepreneurial journey that you will experience failure. Sometimes it can be really hard and shake you to your core. The successful entrepreneurs will look internally and sometimes even step back from the business, as we've heard, in order to find themselves again and to find that passion. The next step in that journey for these successful entrepreneurs is to reprioritize and sometimes to let go.
All while sitting in the south of France. And I'll say this one last thing, is one of the greatest life lessons I've learned is that the energy of letting go and not trying to make something happen, trying to be successful, trying to be number one, trying, but you just let go. There's a great book I read called The Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer. Fantastic book, how he built a multi-million-dollar company on letting go and saying yes to the things that come and let life guide him instead of him guiding life. That's how this business has grown. And I don't know how someone living in another country with a 6 to 8 hour time difference can build the business to where it is today. And I'm incredibly grateful. But it was a letting go.
That's awesome. And I'm going to butcher the quote because I don't remember exactly where it comes from, but there was always a quote with a visual of holding a baby bird in your hand, right? You don't want to hold too tight because you'll crush it, but you don't want to hold it too loose either because then it'll fly away and it'll get away. You've got to hold it with the right amount in order to keep it there, in order for it to thrive and to do well in that position. And I agree with you. I think there's a lot to be said for the frenetic pace of just go and wanting to control everything because you have to mentally, right? Just to kind of keep it all straight. And then the difference of, you know what, let me play it more instinctively and read the room, read what's happening, and take advantage of the opportunities when they're there, but not press when there isn't an opportunity there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the part of the letting go too is that we have to have balance as entrepreneurs, even as employees. Any like our jobs cannot be our life. When we're out of balance, our work is out of balance, and nothing can succeed when it's like that. And I think, that's another thing I learned from the French is that they don't live to work. They work to live. It's not their number one priority in life, and that's not where their identity comes from. And it's about making sure you're exercising, you're eating well, you're living and enjoying life. And then it's, oh yeah, I've got to make money, which sounds completely different in the United States. And so it's a different way of thinking, but it works. It really works.
Entrepreneurs can get caught up in the day-to-day, in the hustle and the bustle of everything that's going on, especially when a company is small. But as the company grows, the needs become very different. Leadership and culture become a driving dynamic. And sometimes you can lose sight of that as you're going through from company to company or from stage to stage in its growth. When you step back, sometimes that leadership and culture refocuses you and becomes a central priority again.
If I kind of try to find the intersection of self and career and purpose, I would say it helped me. I reconnected with something I think I'd always had. I think I got it from my mother, which is an innate sense of empathy and compassion. Mm-hmm. And I realized one of the things that was burning me out in the workplace, at least that specific workplace, was that the grind also came with a lack of appreciation for others, who they were, how they showed up, the challenges that they may be going through inside and outside the workplace. And it helped me sort of get back to and recenter on leadership style. And that's kind of really where I found myself doing a lot of reflection and focus was, how can I bring that to the fore in a very intentional and conscious way and lead with empathy and compassion, and while still, of course, being able to be in the role where you're making decisions, and sometimes those decisions are difficult and they impact people, and not everybody's going to be happy.
Sure.
And I think the other thing that was really at the center of that journey was that it's not about you, or in my case, me, right? That as much as we center ourselves in our own narrative, we are not the center of anyone else's narrative. And it really helps you move through space with others, and again, in a very intentional way.
That actually, the whole concept of it not being about you, I think any parent out there will know real quickly that that is the number one learning that you pick up the moment that you bring that child home is, guess what? Your life is not about you anymore. And that can take a number of different shapes and sizes. But when you look at it that way and apply it to work and apply it to building businesses and growing businesses, it really can make a difference in the culture and the business that you're building, right?
Yes. Well, absolutely. And interesting you mentioned culture. I also spent a lot of time thinking about culture because I was coming from a pretty toxic workplace culture, and that intentionality that I wanted to come out with extended to the kind of culture, not that I just wanted to be in, but that I could foster. And I certainly brought that to my next role, which is a CRO role at a business that was in the AI space, AI enablement, data labeling and annotation for building AI models, both visual and language. And the company I joined itself had a very intentional culture in place, which was so important for me. And the thing a lot of people miss about culture is they think you set culture from the top with mission and vision and values. You can write as many values on the board as you want. Culture springs from the collective people in that business or community, not from the top down. In fact, you create more friction when you try to force culture on folks. But you have to live the culture you want to create and foster yourself, right? Yep. Maybe people call that lead by example. For me, it's a little bit more lead with intentionality. Is that word again? And allow the dynamic to find its footing. And then lean into the good aspects, the positive aspects, right? And have, by the way, difficult conversations. It's also part of it, right? A healthy culture is a culture where people can be vulnerable and still feel safe. And that's the other aspect. It was really important to me, building a culture of safety, because people perform their best when they feel safe.
There are a lot of people that we hear, family is first. Family is most important. At least that's what they say. And then when you look at their actions, and more importantly, their calendars, it doesn't necessarily line up with that. I was really impressed with Brian McNally's take on this when he came out and said his family was third for a while, because in his mind, there were some important foundational pieces that he had to take care of first. Take a listen.
In some ways, there has been a whole lot of change, because one of our values that Jason and I was really important to us is that we're not going to do this and create this business and sell it at the risk of like losing our relationships with our family and our children, my wives, because so many guys go through this and they get divorced and they're on their third, it's just a mess, right? Their personal lives are in total disarray. And I came close to that at one point, but we kind of corrected that. And so really leaning into that, right? How am I a better father, a husband? So every year I set my own priorities for my top three. And at the time of the business, the business was number one, then my health, and then my family. And I know that sounds harsh, but you put your family third? Yeah, I kind of did, in order to serve them. And that doesn't mean I don't see them or not actively involved, but it means if there's a decision point, most of the time the business has to win. And my health had to win so that I could serve people. A good example of that is like on a weekend morning, my son wants to hang out and like watch a TV show. I was like, no, I had to go do some emails, I had to exercise, and then I would hang out with him. And that's not easy, right? But now that's flipped. They're the priority number one, then my health, and then business. Well, actually, friends and family. Business is fourth. It's not even on my radar at the moment. It's there. I do it when these other things are served. So it's just a matter of ranking priorities. It takes the decision fatigue out of it. Like I already know what I need to do, what's most important to me. We do jujitsu, right? So that wins. That's part of my health. Like I do that before I do business now, where in the past, I would skip jujitsu if something came up and I had to do it, right? So just having those priorities. So that's important to me, is just really investing in that. And I started an executive coaching business. I started a men's group, which is another huge thing. I just think men don't have a place where they can be vulnerable and have a place to share each challenges, and men are struggling out there. I was in that position, right? I was very unhappy and unhealthy and unfulfilled, without purpose in life. And I don't want other men to go through their life that way. So started a men's group here locally, and in the process of writing a book to kind of map out my strategy and real tactical things that people can implement to start living a life of freedom and fulfillment for themselves.
I love it. That's great, man. You're repurposing your life for the things that are right here at the center for you. And kind of really paying attention now to some of those, really the legacy type things, right? When I hear that, it sounds like it's about leaving a legacy for your son, for the men around you, for the people around you, the people that you're impacting and having an impact.
Yeah, man. I think my original goal was freedom. Like I knew money was a vehicle for freedom. I'm not a very materialistic person. Even with my business partner, we were the same way, which was great because we were very much aligned, right? Because there was a lot of opportunity to keep that thing running. I mean, everyone was like, "You're crazy. Why are you even selling this?" Like, we've achieved the goal. The goal is have flexibility and freedom to spend time and live our lives.
We like hearing about success stories, but it's not often that we spend time on the hard things, the failure, the introspection, and what it's like to have to refocus in order to go back at it. But now let's get to the good part, the success. because each of these entrepreneurs that we've highlighted today have gone on to new levels of success. And we're going to start here with Courtney, who is leading growth at Cooler Heads, recently raised their Series A funding, and is off to a fantastic start in the growth of that company. Let's hear a little bit more about what she has to say and how excited she is about this opportunity at Cooler Heads. You start off in the commercialization phase. You just recently, congratulations, by the way, announced Series A funding, right? So
Thank you.
Getting from not even commercialized to Series A is a big leap, and one that many entrepreneurs don't ever really get to. How has that journey been? And now you're starting to build your team up again. What is that like?
That journey is like any entrepreneurial journey, Rich. I mean, back to, we were talking earlier about those highs and lows. It's an emotional roller coaster. It is the same way at a startup. Nothing is a guarantee. Tomorrow is not a guarantee. And again, I'm very fortunate to my mentor, Ryan Denny, who introduced me to Cooler Heads. And he was with me at the very beginning when I started at Cooler Heads. We created this commercialization strategy together, and really we wanted to see, can we make this work? Is the market really going to embrace this technology? And the fun part of it was they did. And it hasn't always been perfect. By far hasn't been perfect. I mean, through the days of trying to raise the Series A, and I'm going to give a shout out to Kate Dilligan, our CEO. She's a female founder, CEO. We're here because of her cancer journey. And she took it upon herself to create a product that was easier to use, more user-friendly for both the staff and patients, and to give patients that empowerment that they lose so much during chemotherapy or during their cancer diagnosis. So to be part of this mission, to be part of selling that first unit, to be part of treating that first patient and holding our breath to make sure the system actually worked like we said it would to the FDA, like those are moments you can't make up or you can't relive, Rich.
Brian McNally knew what he wanted when he started the company, and they built the company with the end in mind. So when he had the opportunity to sell the company, what did he do? He went back to the table for more. I love his take on this because he knew where they were as a company and he knew what the opportunity was, and he sure took advantage of it. Yeah, and you guys were obviously very systematic in the way that you built your business, selling to a private equity strategic partner. What was the most bold move that you made along the way?
Yeah, probably the biggest move and the most risk was when we retraded our deal with like 2 weeks left or so. It was scary for sure. But we talk about having values and kind of knowing your worth a little bit. And we really did feel like we were on such a trajectory that we earned it, right? But it was incredibly scary because we're in an environment where we're first time selling a business. We've got brokers and lawyers and advisors, and they're all advising us not to push for what we pushed for. And the reality was we were on a massive increase. Like our trajectory was huge, and we were selling mid-year. And so everything was based off our trailing 12. Well, the deal was dragging a little bit, and we had another just monster month. So our trailing 12 shot up exponentially. And everyone kept warning us that you can't let your foot off the gas. If you start to come down, they're going to retrade and lower what they offered you. And so this is where a little bit of that gritty kind of Philly guy comes in. I'm like, oh, if you're going to retrade me down, I get to retrade you up when I outperform. This is either a two-way street or we're not partners, right? Like, that's how I looked at it, right? So you get the advantage of lowering my price if I don't perform, and I don't get the advantage of increasing my price if I do perform. I didn't feel good about that. So we outperformed. We felt like we earned it, but it was such a massive increase from the initial LOI that it took some conversation. And really, this goes back to sell is human, right? Like, I had just read Never Split the Difference, which, by the way, because it was a good time to read it when you're selling your company. And one of the key elements I pulled out of that book was like, don't get caught up in the numbers. And that's what our broker was saying. Well, this is such a high percentage. No one retrades over that kind of percentage. I'm like, forget the numbers. That's the value of our business, right? I don't care what historical norms are. And on the other side of this table is a strategic buyer who I know wants to work with us, who I have an excellent relationship with the CEO. Like we were on the same page the whole time. This whole thing was going so smooth. And even the private equity group were good guys. And we were their first add-on to the platform. And I'm like, they want to get this deal done. They want to work with us. So how do we work with them to make it comfortable for everybody with the number and just kind of get on the same page? So really just ended up being a phone call with them. We just got out of the lawyers and got out of the bankers and just said, hey man, this is how I'm feeling. This is what I've got going on. This is why we're asking. And we found common ground and we made it happen. But, it took a call with an investment banker who basically said, he yelled at me. He's like, this is big boy stuff. I don't think you know what you're doing. You're about to blow this whole deal and all that kind of stuff. And like always, me and my partner just had to have each other's back and look at each other and say, hey, if we got to take this thing to market, then that's what we have to do. But we're going to get what we've earned. And I don't think that's what's going to happen, but that's what, we need to be willing to do.
And from a company that was almost dead, Krista Anderson's Healthy on the Go has come a long way. She's in many of the US airports today, in each of the convenience stands that you'll see. And she's also in a number of the hospitals, which is right back at the center of where this whole thing started to begin with. It was great hearing her journey and some of the expansion that she has coming up. All right, let's go to, you've got the call to get into the healthcare systems. The business has a heartbeat. Tell us what that experience was like of taking that step, and then where did you go from there? How did the business get from there, having a little bit of a heartbeat, to the thriving business that it is now?
I believed in it again. And I think because someone else believed in it first, to remind me that it was a need, that retailers wanted it, needed it. And so that kind of put the wind back in my sails to start sailing again. And with this healthcare contract, it allowed us to have access to 250,000 healthcare facilities in the United States, because you have to have approval in most situations to sell something in there. So we had basically the contract to do so. And so just started going after that. And luckily we've, last year we got a contract with the second largest healthcare group in the US, and we've been rolling out with them nationwide, which has been really exciting. We're selling, upwards of 650 units a month in just a hospital of this section of healthy snacks, and it's like, people want this. Medical staff are looking for this. And then, it's just seeing the success grow, that I continue to reach out to other opportunities. And, we have a contract since last year as well with a large airport retailer, which is actually a French company. And so working with them, we're rolling out nationwide with them, which has been really exciting, and helping travelers have healthier options. It's funny. It's June 9th right now. So March, about 3 months ago, exactly 3 months ago, actually, I had the idea to do this. And in 3 months, we've developed a whole new beverage program. And we have the coolers in the warehouse ready to go. And we basically vetted, America's top healthy beverages. And that was hard, because there's so much crap in beverages. It's unbelievable. Now, snacks, of course, you see that. But there's a lot more healthier snacks than there are beverages, in my opinion. And so we've had to vet through a lot of stuff. And we've got some of the top healthy beverage brands part of this program, which is super exciting.
As we've seen, the journey of an entrepreneur can be a wild ride. With the failure they experience, the introspection that they have to go through, refocusing themselves, and then reaching new levels of success is a tough journey to go through. But the ones that can do it end up reaping the benefits on the other side and are so much happier as a result of it. Of course, don't leave out the pain in the middle that they have to go through as a result. I hope you've enjoyed this episode in the best of. And if you have, make sure you go back and listen to the full episodes and interviews with our guests today. There will be more of these coming, so stay tuned. Make sure you subscribe. so you don't miss another episode of the Midgame Mindset. Thanks for joining us on the Midgame Mindset. If today's episode sparked a new idea or helped shift your perspective, share it with someone who's ready to grow. Subscribe, leave a review, and keep playing the game. With the right mindset, the best moves are still ahead. Until next time, keep changing the game.